Good morning, everybody. Bonjour, as we say in French. I'm coming from the heart of Burgundy, which has been fairly recently awarded, the UNESCO World Heritage label a few years back. More precisely from the Côte de Beaune, Côte de Nuit. First of all, I'd like to express very warm words of thanks to Adrian Bridge, the CEO of the Tailors, David Fuhrer, who has been in contact initially with our California office, of course, Pancho Campos, and all the team, the organizers, for such a welcome, letting me feel like home. Of course, I don't have so many people at home, but I feel like home, and I'm very glad, very honored to make a short presentation. As mentioned by the organizers, and that is my first perception, that's a fantastic platform using the proper words of the organizer for convergence of expertise, wisdom, inspiration, in order for the group of people, these leaders active in the wine, beverage, shipping, industrial activities, who are attending today to have a big ambition for climate protection. I've been learning a lot, really, thanks to the presentations made today, even today and yesterday, citing just a few names like Monsieur Torres, Monsieur Amorim, Gillian, Gérard Casobon from Concha y Toro, also from Roger Boulton for methodology elements. I've had to amend a little bit the way I wanted to present logistics and explain to you what we are doing in the world of shipping based on the experience of yesterday. As mentioned by Richard, I've been serving a long time the company called JF Hillebrand, which is German-based, headquartered in Mainz. We are celebrating this year our 175th anniversary, which is quite exceptional in the world of shipping, where there are so many movements in terms of merger, acquisitions, etc. We, as Hillebrand, have an important message to share with you, in the sense that we are shipping, in terms of logistics, roughly speaking, 30% of world beverage production. So it gives us a special view on the whole industry. What it means, in order to clarify what transportation is and give you some clear ideas about the surface of the industry, the global shipping industry worldwide is, roughly speaking, 167 million containers of 6 meters that we call 20-foot containers, 167 million containers. The beverage itself is accounting for only 2 million. Don't get me wrong, 2 million is a huge number. When you think that a container which is shipped from Adelaide, Australia, southern Australia, into Stockholm, may be releasing in the atmosphere nearly 4 tons of CO2. So really, 2 million, that's a super big number. I need to probably clarify that what we call logistics, or the older definition, which is freight forwarding, typically is a non-asset industry. It's typically service industry, means we, as Hillebrand, we are not the owner of the container, we are not the owner of the truck, we are not the owner of the vessel. We are, I would say, the architect who is organizing the supply chain on a door-to-door basis. What it means is that in terms of quantification of emissions, it is critical to have one party, it could be Hillebrand, could be another one, who is able to consolidate the various emissions which are released by the various operators in the transport chain. It may be a rail company, maybe a trucker, maybe a port operator, maybe a shipping line. In our position, we're able to quantify emissions door to door under one signature. Another element which is important to mention is that in case of JF Hillebrand, sustainable development was hardly existing up to 5-6 years ago. It is through the efforts of my superior, a gentleman based in Barcelona. His name is Pierre, coincidentally. Thanks to his efforts, we managed to convince our executive board to invest in an emission calculator. And that has been a dramatic change in our case, because nowadays we are able to really support the industry in terms of emissions quantification for the transport. So that is something which is pretty new. And to be absolutely honest with you, 5-6 years ago, sustainability was marketing blah blah, something like that. But now it's made a complete change. We take it very seriously. It's part of our BP 2023 plan for the company. The company is a global company. We are operating on roughly 63,000 port pairs in the world. So we have, to do that, we have a network of 55 offices which are ideally located in both producing and importing countries. Another element which is important when we talk about emission is to clarify that the first efforts we are deploying in terms of emission quantification refer to B2B, business to business. Means that's a typical transaction between a winery, a distiller, a brewer, and its importer or distributor. We don't cover as yet the last mile. That is something that will come in the future, which is quite complex, but we will address it. Concerning the presentation that we had today and yesterday, there is something which is a bit bizarre for me from a logistical transportation viewpoint. I hear lots of highly qualified scientists, wine specialists, etc., referring to the impact of climate change on the local production. However, considering that a typical transport from Northern Europe into Japan takes 21,000 kilometers, one should realize that as much as we focus on the temperature which is impacting the vineyards, it's an impact on the climate all along the 21,000 kilometers of the transport. So that's something which is quite important to mention. The release of greenhouse gas and pollutants happens all along the journey, not just in the Côte de Beaune, in the Porto Douro area, but or Languedoc, but along the sea routes and European routes. Another thing which is important to mention before I start this very quick presentation on logistics, quite a surprise for me is that the people who are attending are typically producers, wine experts. But in our industry, one should consider that the important party may be missing even today in the audience, except people like Monsieur Paul Wilgro yesterday of Marks & Spencer, or Mrs. Cathy Jackson, or Christina Mariani from the Castello Banfi. Typically, it is the freight payer who is the importer, or the importer who is the freight payer, better say. Means, when we speak about reducing emissions, it's great that we are exchanging on that topic, but there is one party which is absolutely critical that should be more and more involved, is the freight payer, because it's really the freight payer who is making the decision how he wants to ship his wine. Will it be a dry container, insulated, reefer, what kind of shipping line he wants to utilize, and the routing. Just to say, I would invite maybe to Paul Roca, Monsieur Paul Roca, General Manager for the OIV, that we have some collaboration, maybe together, in such a way that we could further share the message. I mean, I'm sure you will be interested in the application of emissions linked to transport, but there is more to be done, which is to communicate with the actual freight payer. So maybe with the FIVS and OIV, we may do even a better job. It's very important to associate the stakeholder with the freight payer, because very often transportation logistics is rightly or wrongly seen as a transactional activity instead of being a solution service being delivered to the customer. Me working many years with Hillebrand, I'm convinced it's a solution, because transport has to do about the cost, it has to do about the speed, the quality of service, supply chain management, and also it has to do with the emissions, which is a very critical element. So the question will really be, how can we better support you in your efforts? So now up to the presentation. I think it's that one, Richard. Okay. Okay, here it is. It's a pretty short presentation. I would qualify the presentation to be robust. It is not meant to be scientific. There are just a few numbers, so we keep it light. As our marketing people constantly say, less is more. So that's the inspiration. Okay, landscape agricultural products. If I may use an expression, this company, J.F. Hillebrand, is in the same boat like you are in terms of winemakers or international organizations, because we ship only wine and spirits. Means we are absolutely dependent to the impact of climate on the nature. The second element in the landscape is the quick list of factors which are impacting the wine industry. I don't want to spend too much time on that, because you've been listening a lot about that yesterday and today again. So I would go directly to the third one, which is explaining that transport emissions is accounting for, roughly speaking, 25% of the world emissions created by human being. I'm not referring to the biomass or fermentation quantities which are releasing emissions. The source is the International Council for Clean Transportation and the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. So you see here that the main contributor is car and truck, while sea freight is only 3% in terms of global contribution to the emission. Again, 3%, considering that the wine and spirits business is approximately 167 million equivalent 20-foot container. That's not a detail. That's a big component. No intention to go into the techniques. We at Hillebrand, when we created our emission calculator, we've been inspired by the greenhouse gas protocol. It's a huge book. You have the upstream emission, the downstream emission. You have the enterprise protocol, EP, or the product protocol, PP. We have been using that, and very important, the calculator that we use and that any other shipping company should be using has to be able to give the detail about the various greenhouse gases. Next one. Okay, Paris Agreement landscape is well known to everybody here. That part here is of a huge importance. Today, as we mentioned on that slide, here, today shipping, Deepsea is 3% of global emissions. Now, listening to the study made by the European Parliament fairly recently, it could jump by 2050 to 17%. So that's really a huge step ahead, means that the global trade is supposed, based on the analysis of specialists and research companies, the deep sea shipping would multiply by 3 or 4 by Skyline 2020. That is what it says. Very important element, IMO, International Maritime Organization. I need to mention that name because it shows that the United Nations is very active with the emission. They have a project to reduce emissions by 50% by 2050 globally, despite the big increase in volume. When we talk about sustainability, a quick word, it's not only the greenhouse gas and the warming planet, climate change, it's also about the pollutants, which are a big issue. Means that nowadays the fuel which is burned by the ships is regulated starting in 2020, that's next year, with the use of low sulfur fuel, which is not meant to address climate change, but health hazards due to particulate matters. So that has been regulated by IMO. Next one, this slide of equal importance is not a regulatory summary, it's an illustration of what the industry, what the private sector is recommending. So you have a number of action points which are essential, like commitment, innovation, leading by example, a few recommendations like ambition, which is a word we were using today, predictability, market-oriented, technology enabling, and urgency. A lot is happening. I need to mention Clean Cargo Working Group, which is pulling 85% of the deep sea container capacity on the world. They are releasing every year the performance in terms of emission reduction. So that is a very strong NGO, a business for social responsibility, British Californian. Then you have a Swedish organization called Clean Shipping Index. Then you have the CLECAT, which is a European group of researchers which are working on methodology. And then the European Protection Agency, the USA Smartway. So there are really lots of things happening in many countries. This map is showing the evolution year after year of the footprint for containers. I take this one, North America, going into North Asia. The reduction has been minus 12% in 1 year by usage of bigger vessels, better technologies for the propeller, the shape of the ships, the bow stern, etc. So that is the basis on which emissions are calculated. Next one, giving you an index where sea freight, deep sea container is standing, index 100, and the worst scenario is the air freight, short haul, where you see that the index is jumping to 33,000, not less. Means, in terms of quick wins, to reduce emission, avoid air freight as much as can be, and focus on rail transport. The UK, for example, is using electricity made from a combination of renewable energy or coal or petroleum. So depending on the country, there are different numbers which apply. But that's really an important indication. Solutions for the future, LNG, that's technology, liquefied natural gas, big improvement with this solution. Reduction of carbon footprint by 25% compared to the heavy fuel, or 30% compared to the marine diesel oil. These are the two fuels which are burned by the ship. And when we come back to the issue of health hazards in the emission control areas like North America, Caribbean, North Asia, Baltic, Northern Europe, there's a big step ahead with the reduction of particulate matters in sulfur, and in particulate matters 99%. It's a big industrial evolution which is requiring huge investment from shipping line. The question will be I'm finishing, Richard. The question will be who ready to pick the bill for the cost of sustainability. That is a very important element. Comparison between the various container equipment types, dry container, insulated, reefer container, flexi-tank, iso-tank, all of that is available, and depending on the container equipment that is selected by the freight payer, there are reductions which are already possible for the carbon footprint. Quick wins, protect the cargo at sea in order to avoid having to dump the cargo, use insulation liner, which is reducing the carbon footprint compared to a reefer container. Live data on shipment, we have even launched My Hillebrand application where the freight payer can see his emissions. There are lots more, like slow steaming by the shipping line in order to reduce speed, 21 knots typically down to 18 knots per hour. Also playing with the reduction of empty trip factor, and also playing with the loading factor. There are many ways to optimize supply chain. And the best advice, speak with your logistic provider, speak with us so that we can tailor-make some proposition for you. That's it.